The Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett.
Everybody's talking about consciousness. Everybody wants that eternal kiss. Yeah, everyone's saying there's more than this. Everyone wants to follow their own bliss. Talking about one love, one blood, one life in everyone. One life, give each other. We are sisters and brothers. We sing Om.
On the Expansion Zone, we examine life and our quest to understand who and what we are and of the vastness of human potentials. We explore the making of our world from quantum physics to parapsychology, health, sociology, and philosophy, along with practical living. You are reminded of the possibilities in creating personal change. So for an hour, we'll stimulate and expand the mind.
Shanti, 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 shanti. Sing the world. Let's do it together. Shanti, shanti, shanti. It's time to wake up. Shanti, shanti, to a brighter day. Realize that.
Well, welcome once again to the Expansion Zone. And of course, I'm your host, Sonia Barrett. And good to be with you once again. We are, as you know, in the fund drive. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But I'm going to throw out a quote for you today. And of course, I love this quote. This quote is actually by me. So one day I thought about it and I wrote this quote. And the quote is this: the moment you wake up and realize your own foolishness, what a gift. And it's so true. There's that moment when you wake up and you just sort of realize, you know, your own ridiculousness. I think it's a powerful moment to own that, because it's not about anybody else. It's really just about you, and you just get to see it. So that's the reason why I love that quote and wanted to share that with you. And as I said, we are in the fund drive, and of course, you know, KPFK really depends on you, the listeners, to support the station in keeping going. It's been going for over 60 years now, and it's always relied on its listeners. And so here we are again. And in really doing these fund drives, of course, you know, we all have a thing about having to do the fund drive, but it's something that has to be done. So I really do try, and I know all the other hosts do, to bring you information, no different than any other time, but information that is life-changing, that you would really want to sink your teeth into, and all of that. So what we do ask is that in that process, if you would support the station, we present these amazing gifts from our guests. And of course, this is always just to say thank you for your pledge. And we are going to do that again today. And I really think that you are going to want to do this, because this is so different than just running around, you know, all the time in all of what's going on. And I think this could be really part of really assisting to, you know, pull you out and take you into a more deeper part of yourself and of possibilities. So today's topic is about accessing I have accessing our telekinetic abilities, and powers, but it's so much more that we're going to be talking about, because this is these inner abilities that have been dormant, asleep, unaccessed. So we're going to be really talking about that today with a guest who has been on the show before, Sean McNamara, who is the author of Defy Your Limits, Meditation X, Telekinesis. He also teaches telekinesis lucid dreaming, out-of-body experiences, and remote viewing. So I'm really excited about being able to chat with him today and to let you in on what wonderful gift bundle that we have for you today later on in the show for your pledge. Now, many of us are aware that there are really countless possibilities for us as human beings. I think many people can really agree with that. And much of those possibilities are emerging at this time. For those who are really open to seeing this, I think that we can identify that those possibilities are really sort of opening up. We see it in movies and even our own personal experiences. So if you are someone who has always been interested in tapping into these potentials or in really sharpening these skills, today we will be speaking with someone who has these experiences firsthand and who also teaches others to access this untapped or these untapped levels of normal is what I call it, untapped levels of normal. So Sean McNamara's bio is Sean has been a Denver-based meditation teacher for over a decade and in recent years began teaching telekinesis, lucid dreaming, out-of-body experiences, and remote viewing. In 2019, he led a team of psychics to win the Colorado Pick 3 lottery twice using a team-based remote viewing technique and technique he developed. His goal in teaching these modalities is to remind us of our interconnected nature, which has profound implications regarding our personal freedom. There it is, our personal freedom and joint responsibility to each other and our planet. Again, he's the author of Defy Your Limits. So, Sean, welcome back to the Expansion Zone.
Thanks, Sonia. It's so great to be back with you again.
Yes, and we had really great feedback the last time that you were on, and I thought this would be fantastic to have you be part of this fund drive that we're having, so that people can have an opportunity to really engage and to taste of this experience of all the things that you are sharing. So let's see, where shall we begin with all of this? If you want to just very briefly kind of refresh our memories again about your own curiosity about these possibilities, when did it actually start and when did you decide to sort of dive in deeper into it?
Yeah, so it's actually been the result of something that's haunted me most of my life. And I think I mentioned this in the first interview, but when I was a child, when I was 7 or 8, actually my mother let me know recently, it was on my birthday, I had an appendectomy, an emergency appendectomy. And I'd been in a lot of pain in the days before that, and I was really frightened. But that experience put me face to face with the fact that I'm mortal. Until then, as a child, I hadn't thought about death or getting old or anything like that. And now I knew what severe pain felt like, and I knew that I could have died. Actually, my appendix ruptured as the doctor was removing it. That's what they told me. And they said that if things had gone really bad, I wouldn't have survived. So that ignited a fear of death for me and this burning question about death being the final event in a person's existence. Is there anything after? And I was raised in a Catholic family, so there's that belief system there that I had inherited, being raised as a Catholic. But I'm pretty stubborn, I'm pretty thick-headed.
Thank goodness.
And some part of me, for various reasons, wasn't willing just to believe what I was told or what was written in a book that had been edited many times over the last few centuries. That was part of a political structure. I wanted to find my own way. And as I grew up, I had other experiences that reminded me of my mortality. I had a couple of growths taken out of my chest, and each time there's that period where you're waiting for the test results to make sure it's not cancer. So that was pretty frightening. And I also had heart surgery when I was in my mid-20s. It was a minor procedure, but it was a reminder
You've had lots of reminders.
that death is coming. And I still didn't have any answers. So I wanted to find my own way to have a direct experience to let me know that we're more than just bags of skin and bones. And I started investigating other religions, particularly Buddhism, because I thought if I learned how to meditate really well, I would make some discoveries directly by looking at my own mind. And it was quite helpful. But I found out that, even in a tradition like that, because it's an established ancient tradition, it has its own dogma. And what I realized after some time was, instead of trying to answer my own question about the afterlife, I had accidentally, let's say, forgotten that pursuit and decided to try and become a good Buddhist. And which is fine, but certain things happened that caused me to take a close look at what my real goal was in my spiritual pursuit, and to ask, is this path that I'm following leading me closer to it or further away from it? And I realized, even though I loved the tradition I was part of, it had a lot of good things to offer, it wasn't taking me where I wanted to go. And even Buddhism has its own beliefs and dogmas about the afterlife and reincarnation and things like that.
They all have their limitations.
They all have their limitations, partly because once a religion or a tradition is fixed, its most important job is basically to preserve itself over the generations, which means it's not really open to change or to questioning or anything like that. It's basically passing down a series of teachings, trying to preserve them for as long as possible, of course, to help people. That's always the intention, but there's a closedness about it. And I wanted to find my answers my own way, and I realized that I had stopped doing that. But I remembered something that I had seen when I was younger in the 80s, that Shirley MacLaine movie, Out on a Limb.
Oh, yes.
And there's that scene in it where she's in a hot springs in Peru and she has a spontaneous out-of-body experience. And I remembered that scene, and I found the movie on YouTube, actually, and that really inspired me to think about trying seriously to have an out-of-body experience, because I had tried when I was a teenager, but I hadn't succeeded. I think I didn't have the maturity at the time to train my mind and to stick with it until I succeeded. I just wasn't ready for that. But now, as an adult who had been trained in meditation for some time, I felt ready. And there were some much better books, or a larger variety of books available with techniques. So I started training in a very serious way. And over a couple of, maybe 3 or 4 months, 3.5 months, I trained every day. I'd go home in the afternoon and do a technique, usually incorporating it into an afternoon nap to explore that transition of consciousness. And there were techniques I'd practice at bedtime and in the middle of the night. Sometimes I'd get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go out to the living room, lay on the couch, and do some techniques there. And I was really driven because I had become frustrated by my spiritual pursuit so far, frustrated by other things, and I really wanted to figure it out. And I worked hard, and finally I had my first out-of-body experience, in which, as soon as I returned to my body, it only lasted a few moments, but as soon as I returned to my body, my fear of death, which had haunted me my entire life, was completely gone. And I felt free. And I want to be careful here that I felt free of my fear, but it wasn't like instant enlightenment or tons of wisdom or anything like that. I don't know, some people have those ideas about what out-of-body experiences are, but when I went over to the other side, I was basically the same person I am now. Although I had a wider perspective about reality and my freedom from fear, but I was, still a regular person. But it was very interesting, and I kept having more and more experiences.
And these were experiences that were that you were initiating. I mean, you got to the point where you could do that, and they weren't just random, because I know a lot of times they are random out-of-body experiences. Right.
Well, for me, they were not random, and I had to work really hard for each one of them. I'm sort of like the thick-headed student, where all of these abilities that I've experienced in my adulthood have come to me only through hard work. I'm not a natural at any of these things. And with out-of-body experiences, It wasn't the kind of thing where, okay, tonight I'm going to leave my body, and then I would lay down and then it would happen. No, for me, it was the application of the technique over and over again, once, twice, sometimes 3 times a day, until it triggered the separation from the physical, until it triggered my transference of consciousness to another domain, or trigger a change in where I perceive my sense of self to be, away from my physical body. So I just had to stick with it, and then it would happen. And then I'd take some time to incorporate the experience, because no two OBEs or out-of-body experiences are the same, at least in my experience. And there's always this period of time where I had to incorporate what I learned or experienced. It's a very emotional process sometimes. And then I would start training again for the next one. And sometimes it would take several days or maybe a couple of weeks, and then it would happen again. So I could never quite predict exactly when it would happen. Sometimes I'd have a feeling, I'd feel ripe, like, oh, I think I'm close, I'm ready. Mm-hmm. And of course, it was always born out of constantly training, and having a strong intention. And then another one would happen. One thing I learned along the way is to give up personal control over the experience, because I could have these sensations that would cue me into the fact that I was about to separate. Some people call this the vibrational state. I call them separation signals. Sometimes it's about different kinds of noises or loud sounds or certain sensations in the body, or a literal vibrational sensation in the body. And when I would start to separate, I would have an idea of where I wanted to go, which was quite limiting, although it worked, but it was limiting. And I realized as I continued that the more I let go and let my higher self take the wheel, so to speak, the richer an experience I would have. So I would just let go. I would start feeling distant or moving away from my body. Sometimes it's a delightful floating feeling, but it's not always what you might imagine of floating horizontally upwards. Sometimes my feet would rise up and I'd sink down through the floor and find myself downstairs, or I would instantly be projected out into outer space or into another domain. So a lot of different things could happen, but the more I let go, the richer and the longer these experiences would be. They would last longer. And that's the challenge at the out-of-body experience for a lot of people, is making it last longer than a few moments, because once you get overwhelmed with excitement or emotion, that usually recalls the consciousness back into the physical body.
Absolutely. I know, because that definitely has happened to me, because I think the shock and at the same time the delight of it happening brings the conscious, I think to some degree, I guess the conscious mind sort of interrupts that or something. And then right when you realize it, as soon as you realize it, you're boom, you're back down. You get to see yourself. Wow, I thought I was laying down. Then you realize that your astral self is sitting up. I mean, so I completely get that.
Yeah, so it can be a little frustrating. Mm-hmm. The other limitation of it, aside from how long it lasts, is that it's not the kind of thing you can really show other people. Unless someone is really clairvoyant and they happen to be looking for you or nearby, they might see your consciousness or something like that. But for most people, all they would see is your body laying in bed or laying on the floor or on a couch or wherever you practice your OBEs. And I wanted to share these kinds of things with other people. I'd been teaching meditation already for a long time, and I thought, well, I could teach my students these techniques, but I can't lay down and let them, they wouldn't be able to see me leaving. It just doesn't work that way. There are records of scientific studies that people have done in the past where there was success with that, but I wasn't quite there. So I wanted to find another way to show people in broad daylight, in front of their very eyes, that we do extend beyond just our physical body, that we're more than just a bag of skin and bones. And that consciousness really does expand beyond time and space, because that's a little bit of what I was starting to realize through the out-of-body experience. And then I discovered telekinesis, which is a subset of psychokinesis. Psycho meaning mind or soul, kinesis meaning movement. So this is about mind over matter. Telekinesis, with the word tele, implies distance. So it means affecting a physical object that is separate from you at a distance. So you're not touching it. For example, with spoon bending, I've been doing some spoon bending classes lately. You hold the spoon in your hand. So you're touching it. So you can't call that telekinesis, but it is psychokinesis because you're applying your mental intention and your non-physical energy to the process. But with telekinesis, you're not touching the object. You're ideally several feet away by the time you've trained yourself enough. And I saw people doing it online on YouTube. There are a lot of fake videos out there. There are a lot of magicians who can replicate the appearance of telekinesis, but then there's actual telekinesis. And I found some people out there who were doing it. And by just absorbing whatever they shared on their YouTube videos and applying what I knew about meditation over time, and this is a process of 2.5 months of training every day, once again, just sticking with it, I would take a little piece of paper or tinfoil and balance it on a needle and then place a glass container over it so that the wind wouldn't blow it or anything like that. And every day I sat in front of that thing trying to figure out a way to move it with my mind or my energy or my intention, whatever it took. I was just experimenting with any idea I could think of and what I could glean off of YouTube. And so for 2.5 months, I would sit there sometimes for an hour, sometimes longer, and nothing would happen. And one night I was going to sleep and this image arose in my mind, just behind my skull and my forehead, this image of the object swinging back and forth on the needle. And I don't know why it happened, but it was this very foggy, glowy image in my mind. And it just lingered for a few minutes until I fell asleep. But then it was the day after or a couple of days after that when the object actually started to move while I was physically sitting there awake in front of the object trying to get it to move. So it finally happened. But what that nighttime experience taught me was that something had to change inside of me, inside of my mind, before something could change out there in the real world. And the other thing I realized when I succeeded was that it wasn't my ordinary awake, focused mind that moved it. One of the blessings or accidental blessings of sitting there for an hour at a time is that I would become very bored in the process. And I'd start daydreaming. And it was often when I would start daydreaming and I would take my conscious attention off the object when it would start to move, which is interesting. So I'm pretty sure, and I've done experiments with those EEG machines that measure your brain waves, that it was during the transition from a wide awake state, from the beta wavelength down into alpha, or perhaps even a high theta state, which people find themselves in when they're daydreaming, when they're meditating, when they're doing energy healing. I would naturally drop into the states out of sheer boredom, and that's when the object would move. So I got to the point where I trained myself and I worked on a technique that made it very easy to teach this to someone, and I started teaching people. And so they could see with their own eyes, because I learned really quickly that I could tell people about mind over matter. I could even make videos about it. But there's a part of everyone's mind that doesn't believe this is possible. And I learned that the only thing that will change a person's mind is their own direct experience. So for someone to go from, I don't believe it, or this is fake, or this is impossible, to, oh my gosh, this is real, undeniably real, they need to go through the process of training themselves and seeing the movement happen from their own effort. And there are a couple of qualities from telekinesis that assure a person that it's them moving it. And it's not heat, it's not wind, it's not anything like that. And part of it is a process of relaxing through using a special breathing technique and how you look at the object with your eyes that does something to the environment in and around the object, the target object, that gets it to move. And part of that I realized was when I was breathing a certain way and I felt a very strong connection with the object, I could change the direction of the movement or stop the movement, or the movement would speed up or slow down according to how I was inhaling, or if I was holding my breath, or exhaling or holding my breath out. Of course, anyone who's practiced yoga or qigong knows that there is a direct relationship between the physical breath and one's consciousness and the flow of subtle energy, whether you call it prana or chi or life force, whatever that is. how a person breathes can affect that. And of course, the more practiced a person is, it might depend less and less on the physical breath, and they can just direct their intention and energy through will alone. But that's kind of a nuts and bolts idea about it. But then I started teaching it to people, which was a lot of fun, because often I'd get energy healers coming to class, and this was just a way for them to see that indeed they did have an effect on a physical object in their environment. Because when a person does energy healing, sometimes it's easy to be unsure or less than 100% confident that you actually did something. A person might feel different, but you're not quite sure if, was it me, was it them, was this effect going to happen anyway? But telekinesis, where you intentionally and quickly change an object by how you pay attention to it, is a verification. It's confirmation.
Definite evidence. Mm-hmm.
Definite evidence that our mind does directly affect others around us and the physical world around us. Mm. And what's interesting is the people who generally do best in my live classes are people who come with either no expectations or they're positive about it.
Makes sense.
Yeah, because they're just open-minded.
Right, makes sense. So basically, what I'm really hearing, and of course I'm asking this question, well, I know the answer, but, is it then a matter of how easy or how, maybe, or it's not easy? Is this more so based on determination and commitment?
Yeah, well, here's the funny thing is, when a person, I'll just speak to my own experience and what I've seen with people who I've trained or trained with, when a person develops an automated discipline of training regularly, at first it's hard, but then it becomes habit. And during that process, they learn how to relax quicker and easier and more automatically.
Key habits.
Yeah, it's really just about habits. It's the same kind of thing that's involved with sticking to a diet or a workout regimen, or
with anything, basically.
Or studying in school, or growing a business, or fostering relationships with children or spouse or partner.
It's just the bottom line of it. I mean, it's necessary. And so, if one is really interested, it depends on how interested you are to actually commit and dedicate, and I hear you. Believe me, I can relate. Shirley MacLaine's book was actually one of the first books that I read, right before completely diving into something similar. What you're talking about, my quest to understand beyond, what was standard or normal, or just beyond all of the 3D world, and the commitment day in, day out, day in, day out. I get it, for 10 years, day in, day out, till you develop these certain abilities. So I think anybody can, if they truly want to do that. Now, we're going to be going to break in just a moment, but and we're going to be talking about more. But before I go to break, I do want my audience to know that we have a pack for you today, and based on so much of what you've been hearing right now from Sean, and that pack is called the Mind Possible Pack. And in that pack, there is his platinum bundle, which includes all of his online courses for telekinesis, lucid dreaming, and out-of-body experiences, remote viewing, meditation, and vagus nerve stimulation. And on top of that, what we've added, and thanks to Sean, we've added an hour workshop, which Sean is going to present. It's a webinar with Sean. And I believe, Sean, is this then like an intro to much of this, or to remote viewing?
Yeah, it's going to be focused on remote viewing, and people will experience their clairvoyance within an hour.
Great. All right. So that's included in this pack, and that's going to actually be, we're looking at September 10th as the date to do that on Zoom. And then we're also going to include a audio copy of the workshop. And all of that is going to be for a pledge of $125. This is like really honestly worth way more when you look at what you can actually learn from all of this and be able to actually participate in a workshop with Sean McNamara. So it's for a pledge of $125, and the number for that is 818-985-5735, 818-985-5735. It's a pledge of $125, which, as you know, you can put it on a credit card if you need to do that, or possibly split up the payments as well. You'll need to make sure that you provide your first name, last name, and your email address. So this is the Mind Possible Pack. We're going to be talking more about all what's in this pack when we come back from the break. So stay tuned, and we will be right back after this brief break. And we are back. And of course, you are tuned in to KPFK 90.7 FM in Southern California and streaming live at kpfk.org. You are listening to The Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett. Of course, me, I'm your host. And my guest is Sean McNamara. And we are talking about all that he does. And it's in this Mind Possible Pack, which includes his Platinum Bundle, which has all of his courses for telekinesis, lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences, remote viewing, meditation, and vagus nerve stimulation, and the opportunity to then also attend this 1-hour workshop / webinar with Sean on September 10th. It's on Zoom. And you'll have all of that information because it's all in the pack, and you'll also receive an audio copy of the this workshop. And again, it's for a pledge of $125. 818-985-5735. This is really, honestly, an amazing pack, and I wish something like that was around a long time ago when I was doing what I was doing and didn't know that there was anybody out there doing this, which is how I ended up reading Shirley MacLaine's Out on a Limb. Which let me know, wow, it's not just me asking these questions back in 1991, 92. So, all right, now, Sean, let's move into, okay, so you talked about telekinesis, and you talked about your experience with lucid dreaming, and actually also teaching others how to be able to do this. And remote viewing, now that's all also on the same concept, the same principles, and meditation and the vagus nerve stimulation, whichever one you want to talk about first.
Sure. I guess it's easy to go into the remote viewing, because what happened after I was working with telekinesis is, and I won't say too much about this, but I developed an interest in mediumship, and I started, well, my wife bought me a gift to go to a seance, to a mediumship reading. And I had a wonderful experience there. And I started training with that teacher. Her name is Jude Starks. She's here in Denver, and she's a wonderful teacher. And I did a year-long training program, which included training in clairvoyance and the various types of psychic perception. And I really enjoyed it. And I also discovered remote viewing, which is really a specific protocol for applying one's clairvoyance and clairaudience, clairsentient, all the clairs, all the perceptions through all one's senses, how they're converted into ideas in the mind and experiences in the mind, perceptions. And I read books about remote viewing, and I joined a remote viewing group called the Applied Precognition Project, which taught me how to use remote viewing to predict events. So it's a combination of clairvoyance with precognition. So getting information from the future, which was amazing. And I have this fond memory of, I took a trip to Las Vegas, and I decided to do an experiment with my wife to try and predict the outcome of some hockey games, actually a hockey game and a football game. And there were 3 games we were trying to predict using remote viewing. And I had to partner up with my wife, who was home in Denver. And so she set up this protocol for me, the targets for me to try and perceive with clairvoyance. But these were targets that I would be shown the following day after the game was done. And through this process, she was able to let me know what I was seeing in the future. And so one picture was associated with the team winning, and the other picture was associated with the other team winning. And this is how we were able to go in the future and bring the information to the present so that I could place a wager at the sports book in the casino. And we actually won 2 out of 3 times. And that really got me fired up. It was so much fun. It wasn't
Wow.
about the money. There's not a lot of money involved with this, but just betting on sports is a way to, it's a future
It's
event.
like you're exercising those muscles, Yeah.
Yeah. And I decided to also teach the basic protocol to my friends here in Denver because I realized remote viewing is a little different from basic meditation, because meditation is like learning how to turn on a beautiful fast car, but you just leave it in park and leave the engine running, and you experience that hum of the engine and the peacefulness sitting in the cabin of the car. The remote viewing is taking that car, putting it in drive, and taking your mind somewhere, picking up a passenger, picking up some information.
Love the analogy.
And then doing something with it, taking it back, and you can drive that car into the past, into the future, or somewhere else in the present, and gain information across space and time. And of course, I think every religion, every spiritual tradition has stories of saints and seers and shamans and others who, because they know how to open their mind and connect with that deeper nature of reality, they can go and acquire information across space and time, often for healing purposes, for connecting to spirit, or for basic survival, finding out where's the closest herd of buffalo or reindeer, whichever part of the world you live in, when is the best time to harvest or to plant seeds. A lot of this knowledge was gained through sending one's consciousness out into the non-physical planes. And this is, for me, it's another example of how we are all interconnected with each other and with all realities across space and time, because the mind really does go out there. Something that's interesting with remote viewing is I might set up 2 targets for someone, but I'm only going to show them one of them. So that's the one I want them to see. And something that we call displacement occurs sometimes. And that's that even if I never, ever, ever show them the other picture, they might draw what they're seeing with their mind, with their clairvoyance, and they're getting a really good image of that other picture that I had planned to never show them, but I had it as an alternate target. So the mind can go out and access specific information. It can access potential information. It can access various probabilities of what's going to happen in the future. That's how incredibly tapped in our deepest nature is with this universe. So for me, remote viewing and telekinesis, the out-of-body experience, and the rest of it is for me, it's spiritual. It's a spiritual process of being reminded over and over again that we are interconnected with each other at a very deep level. And we separate from that reality by going really into the conscious, logical, rational mind. And also when we operate off of base animal survival tendencies, which sometimes we have to do to survive. But that takes us out of this deeply interconnected state. But all of this is rooted in my experience with meditation, which I love and which I've trained in for a long time. But now when I meditate, I've stripped it from all the dogma that I was trained in. And it's really just a way to look directly at one's mind, which involves relaxing the body. One thing that I realized after years of training people is one of the biggest complaints or struggles that people have is they'll sit down to meditate and they just can't get there. They can't relax quickly enough. So they struggle for about 45 minutes before they start to relax, and then their time is up and they have to go to work or something. And I realized that modern living is really difficult for people. So just sitting down and following the breath or doing a visualization is not quite enough for a lot of people to get them in a very profound meditative state. And I started doing research on the vagus nerve, which is actually a pair of nerves that run from the brain down through the major organs in the body, down to the upper part of the bowels. But it connects with the heart, with other organs, runs through the neck, behind the ears. And it has to do with the parasympathetic system. So when the vagus nerve is toned, a person is very relaxed, but they can go into a very heightened state quickly for survival. So if they need to run, boom, their heart can start beating very quickly to supply oxygen to their legs, and they can run. And then they can relax deeply again when they return to a parasympathetic state. So a very well-toned vagus nerve helps that. It helps with something called heart rate variability. So the more heart rate variability you have, the better your system is. But for people who have chronic stress because of work or trauma, or they're just stuck in terrible traffic every day, and if you're in LA, maybe you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
You know, modern living is frustrating, and maybe trying to sit down and follow your breath for half an hour, 45 minutes isn't enough to help get you in that state. But if you can directly work with your vagus nerve, it's like hacking the system, hacking your body's system, your physiology. So that instead of using the mind to relax the body, you relax the body directly, and that has an immediate effect on the mind. So I created this training course based off of a class that I gave. I just recorded everything. Then I created a routine that a person can do in 20 minutes with various steps. Most of them have to do with toning the vagus nerve or affecting the nerve as it runs through the body with different postures that resemble yoga, that you don't have to be a yogi practitioner to do it. They're very simple postures. But also other techniques, like the first one, the one it begins with, and it uses twice through the cycle, actually has to do with, this is going to sound like torture, but it's actually wonderful, with applying icy cold water to your face while you hold your breath. And this does something called inciting the mammalian reflex. So we've all heard stories, I think, or many of us have heard stories of the little boy who's skating on a frozen lake, and then he falls through the ice and he's in the water, and the rescuers pull him out of the water 10 minutes later, take him to the hospital, and they revive him, and he's perfectly okay, right?
Right.
It sounds like a miracle story, but it's actually part of our physiology. They've done this experiment with mice and other animals in the laboratory. You can submerge a mammal under cold water, and immediately their body responds by slowing down the heart rate and drawing blood to the core of the body. It's basically slowing down all the systems so that it conserves the oxygen in the blood, so that you can survive if you don't get to breathe for a while.
Yeah, survival technique. Well, the body's survival technique or
Mm-hmm.
setup. Mm-hmm.
And basically, the body goes into a very relaxed state very quickly. So doing this technique of holding a very icy cold, moist rag or towel to your face, and just holding until you become, until you get the urge to breathe, and doing that several times, brings on that mammalian it's called the dive reflex. So it brings it on, and you notice, because you're completely safe, you're doing this in your living room or in your bedroom, so you're not in danger of drowning or dying or anything, which allows you to relax even further. Your body relaxes, your mind becomes relaxed, and suddenly you're breathing a lot more slowly, and you come into yourself easier. And then there are other parts of the routine that access the nerve or affect the nerve in different ways.
Wow. So this is, I mean, quite an amazing pack that people are going to get. This is really wonderful, folks. I mean, I haven't heard anybody have this, put this together before for you. And I think this is such an opportune time, especially because people are you're in the house, you're not going out as much, even if you're leaving. There's just things that's not happening. And instead of us focusing our attention on worrying or all the external mental running around that we're doing, this is incredibly balancing, and it's allowing us to tap into all these aspects of us that's there, all of these normals that are there that are unaccessed, and pull us in a bit more from just being so external all the time. So, along with everything that I'm saying, I just want to remind you once again that your pledge is so appreciated by the station, by me, for, this show. I am very fortunate to be able to share my show with a large audience. Obviously, it's even nicer to be able to do that on terrestrial radio. So I just want to remind you that this is actually a thank you gift for your pledge to the station, for supporting the station and for supporting this show. And to do that, it's the Mind Possible Pack that you're going to ask for. And you can also give this as a gift. This is such a great gift as well. You have maybe a young person or a spouse or, a great friend who has an interest in all of this. And you think, what could I get that person? And I think this is really a great gift. So the Mind Possible Pack, it's for a pledge of $125. And you can obtain this pack by pledging and calling 818-985-5735. And I'll remind you what's in that pack. It's called a Platinum Bundle, which includes all of Sean McNamara's online courses, telekinesis, lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences, remote viewing, meditation, and vagus nerve stimulation, which he just got done talking about. All of that information is in there. And also, you will be able to attend an hour-long workshop webinar with Sean McNamara. So, of course, that is online. It's through Zoom. And going to be focused on remote viewing. And it's September 10th is the date that we're looking at this time. You'll also receive an audio copy of the workshop. So yeah, that's the pack. That's an amazing pack. 818-985-5735 for a pledge of $125. Be sure, first name, last name, and email address for sure. Do provide your email address so that they don't have to go trying to get a hold of you to get the email address. So first name, last name for sure, an email address. I just think it would just be exciting to be able to have this. So I hope that you do take advantage of that. Now, Sean, when you were talking about the cold water, let me tell you, I have done the face in the bowl of ice.
Mm-hmm.
It is very interesting. It is very numbing, but I have done the face in the bowl of ice. I have done quite a few interesting things, but that's one of those. So I get you. And, all of that is so very different on the body. And, Sean, what's so fascinating is the body has all of these turn on points. You know what I mean? There's all these things that just are just sitting there, unaccessed. Yet it's also normal. This is an amazing system that is begging to be more fully accessed, and that's what you're doing. That's what you're presenting.
Absolutely. Everyone, that's a main part of my message to people is everyone has the resources they need already inside of them, and you don't have to give your personal power away to anyone else. Like it's all with you, in you already, and maybe you just need a friend to show you some techniques to access it, and that's what this Platinum Bundle, what the Mind Possible Pack is all about, giving you some helpful techniques, sharing my experience with you. And especially now, it's a very stressful time. Many people are stuck at home, struggling, they're stressed out. We're undergoing a social type of trauma, I think, because of everything that's happening. It's very emotional, very overwhelming, which is interesting because we need to take care of ourselves through this time, but also spiritually or conscientiously speaking, it's a very interesting time to access our dreams, to gain information from that, to reach out to the spiritual world and ask for guidance. And part of this is related to the survival mechanism. It's not just physical, it's connecting with something larger than ourselves to reassure us that this is not the end of the story, that things will continue, they will change. And there's a bigger part of us that is part of this reality. So all these techniques will help us remember that, which hopefully provides some solace for people, some support, and just show them that they can access what they already have inside of them and give them a little bit of confidence and hope, because hopefully this will pass. And if we can just take care of ourselves and maybe have some fun along the way, that will add something a little bit positive while we go through this very, very challenging time.
Absolutely. And so, so when you look at it, it's an empowering pack. As I listen to you, and I'm thinking, no, this is a time where people need to feel like they have power. And I think when we talk about all of these things, reminding people that they really, really do. And I like that you reminding folks that the shift that you made when you were able to really exercise telekinesis, where you saw evidence of that. It was when the shift took place in you. And I think so it is all with everything else. It's the shift has to take place inside of us, and because that's where the power is really coming from. And so this is what I'm hearing. And also, Sean, I wanted to say that you talk about all the things that you had done in terms of studying meditation and all of the other avenues, tools, and all of it led you here. It's like somehow I bet you're utilizing all the things you've learned from all of those things. You did them for a time, but it's like they all needed to be, at least in your journey, they all needed to be a part of that to get you here. And so it is with everybody right now. It's like, look at your whole life. Everything up until this point has been a stepping stone until up to this very moment. And what you do with this moment can be really profound. So Sean, anything else that you would like to add? I know we have a couple of minutes left.
Sure.
But I like the habit, and I like you saying or mentioning again that this is about forming a habit. It's like reprogramming and patterns, creating new patterns, so on.
Something you just said about empowering ourselves. People need power, and you're right. All these things happened for me at a certain time, and they had their purpose, and some of them still do. And it's mostly about connecting with other people. But there really is a bigger message here that if you have a dream or if you have a desire and you work at it, all you have to do is not give up and you'll get there. And so when you achieve something that most people think is impossible, it gives a person confidence that maybe, and now is probably a difficult time for many people to start a business, but to start thinking about how you're going to rise like a phoenix through this process and after this time on our planet. What relationships will you start? What relationships may you end? Who will you become? That you can renew yourself, you can be reborn into another version of yourself, that there is more. And you can get there, you can experience it. You don't have to leave it to randomness. You can have personal agency and lead the way in your own life.
It's your birthright.
It's your birthright. And I know it's more difficult for some people than others. There are systemic, societal factors involved. But within that, each person as an individual does have more power than they might believe they do. Maybe they've been told by other people that they don't. Maybe they've been hurt or affected a certain way. But hopefully something will happen that gives them self-confidence to try a new perspective, to see that there is something inside worth showing others and communicating to others.
You're right. A person might not feel like they do have that power right now, but they absolutely do. I think that this is a moment of grand opportunity. It doesn't seem like it, but I think it is. I think we're being forced to see ourselves in just so many ways as individuals. I think it's more about the individual taking ownership of self and really accessing more of who they are and what is possible. So I just wanted to say that. And I want to thank you so much, Sean, for being on the show. And thank you so much for this wonderful pack, this wonderful opportunity that people are going to be gifted with. Thank you so, so much. And I look forward to chatting with you again, as I certainly will have you back. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. I really appreciate talking to you. I had a lovely time, and it was really nice to connect with your viewers as well. So I wish everyone the best.
Thank you. And so now to you once again, before we leave, I want to remind you what we're speaking of. This is the Mind Possible Pack. We need that Mind Possible Pack right now. We need to be reminded of what is possible. Make it happen. So it's the Mind Possible Pack for a pledge of $125. a pledge of $125. Really? And you can put this on a credit card. You can split it up if you need to do that. 818-985-5735. And again, in that pack is the Platinum Bundle, which includes all of Sean's online courses, telekinesis, lucid dreaming, and out-of-body experiences, remote viewing, meditation, and vagus nerve stimulation. You can attend the 1-hour workshop. This is all specifically for the KPFK pledgers. This is not on the website. So it's an hour webinar with Sean McNamara, and he's going to be talking about remote viewing. He's going to be doing an intro, teaching you some things, September 10th on Zoom, and you'll also receive a copy of this workshop. 818-985-5735 for a pledge of $125. Again, I want to thank Sean and McNamara, and I want to thank you, the listener, for being here, and I want to thank our engineer, D'Angelo Jones. And I think that's it. TheExpansionZone.com. Visit the website for the archive. For the newsletter, sign up for the newsletter so you know who's going to be on the show and all that good stuff. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Find out more about me. Visit therealsoniabarrett.com. That's it. And I'd like to remind you, as always, to live life to its fullest and question everything. Until next time, see you then. 818-985-5735 is the number. Take care.